Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here. It's my first talk at IDC as a faculty member, so I'm really excited to be here today. My field of research is about human-computer interaction, so it's how we use technology and how technology can support us better. And some of the work I've been doing is about storytelling, and I've worked with some journalists, and so I guess that's why Noam asked me to come today. But before we start, I am not a journalist, I'm a technologist, so I'm not here to tell you how to do your job, and I don't want to offend anyone, so I'm going to try to not say something that's wrong about journalism, but please do correct me if I do. So I want to tell you basically how technology can support you better. So I'm really excited because some of the work I did in the past was with the Brown Institute for Media Innovation. So this is an institute that's between Stanford University and Columbia School of Journalism. So it's basically technologists from Stanford and journalists from Columbia getting together and trying to understand how we can better support storytelling and journalism in the future. So before we really start on the topic of drones, I want to talk about digital revolution. So what's digital revolution? So if we think about journalists, they've had a lot of tools and different ways of expressing their work to the population. So, and it's evolved with technology. So if we look at the first technologies, we're basically looking at what's more traditional media. And can I just have a show of hand of who's coming from a more traditional media environment? And who's more like social media and maybe new? Okay, thanks. So basically, if we look at those, we're all very familiar with that. I mean, we're talking about books and newspapers and radio and TV. And although your TV set may not look like this one, the media is the same. So now with the digital revolution, we're seeing some changes here. So now we have access to satellites and we have access to the world. We can have news from China, we can have news from Africa, we can have news from the US in real time everywhere. And we also have mobile news, and that's changed the way we consume information very much. Because if I'm reading the newspaper for a whole morning, or if I'm reading something on my phone while I'm on the bus for 5 minutes, I'm not going to look at it the same way. So I'm not saying one technique is better than the other, I'm saying they're different. And the fact that they're different may need different technology supporting them as well. The other thing that's really changed about the digital revolution is really this computerization of media and the access to user-created content. So in the past, we would have journalists that would basically be trained, like probably a lot of you are, that would give information in the way they learned to do it. But now we're in a situation where people find news, or they maybe take a video on their phone and they just uploaded it on YouTube. So that's very different, because how do we verify the source of the media, what it means? It's not the same way we used to with traditional journalism. So now if we keep talking about the digital revolution, this is not it. We can do much more. So here, can you recognize what it is on the left? Yeah, 360 camera. So this is what it looks like from up close. So here is just some little GoPros, so it's very, very light cameras that are actually pretty cheap that are put together. And the idea is that you can get a full movie that shows you the whole environment. And it may not look that different, but it really is. Because now you're not only in a scene where you have someone who planned what you're going to see, but you're in the environment and you can see everything. You can see what's above, you can see what's below. You can have the same feel that the journalist was having while interviewing. And I think that's also really important, because at a time where we have people at head of governments that don't believe in journalism and pretend that journalism is organized in certain ways and they're trying to show you things that are maybe not true, by having cameras that shows you the whole surrounding, it's really hard to cheat. And so you give really this sense of presence, and then you can use tools like virtual reality to then show you in real time what's going on. And actually what's really hard with this type of cameras is not necessarily the filming itself, is what is called stitching, is putting the images together. And this is where computer science can help you. It's really hard to put those images together, and this is not something that's done right now in real time. But by having better algorithms and more powerful computers, we're getting better and better at this, and now it's getting more widespread. So I want to show you a video of what this looks like. So I'm going to show you a little bit of something called On the Brink of Famine. Has any one of you seen it? None of you? So it's actually a really cool project. So it was colleagues of mine at the Brown Institute. So the leader on this project was Marcel Hopkins. And she was really interested in the problem with famine in South Sudan. So I'm just going to show you a very quick video. I guess we can. Can someone help me with that? But basically what you're seeing here is like you can, with the 360, go all around the video. So you're not necessarily only seeing what the journalist wants you to see, but you see everything around it. So you can see the field, you can see the sky, you get a much better sense of what's going on. And we can go back to a different scene. So here it's in a hospital. It's a little bit of difficult images sometimes. But you can really see what's going on all around you. And that's very different from working with a more traditional media. So now if we continue with the digital revolution, there's another project I want to show you, and it's another friend of mine. The project is called CTBeat. So he was at Cornell Tech doing his postdoc. The person is Vash Farts, Israeli. And his idea, so this is actually a really cool project. So I don't know if you can recognize, but this is Manhattan in the middle. And the idea is they're trying to leverage social network, thinking, well, if something is happening in real time, everybody's going to tweet about it. And we can support journalists by telling them, hey, something is happening. And maybe it's something that wasn't planned. Because, often, an event is going to happen, and then you're going to go and cover it. But when something is happening live, whether it's good or bad, sometimes you don't know where it is, and it takes a bit of time. But the idea of the tool is as soon as we start aggregating data from different social networks showing that something is happening, then all of a sudden it shows you those hot spots, which are the circles in the image, and then it gives journalists a chance of figuring out what's going on. When they click on the hotspot here, they can see some photos, and they can see some of the data actually produced by people. So what I wanted to show you here is that actually the digital revolution is not only that we can use tools like mobile computing or like phones or like Twitter, but it's also that we can go much further and we can use very sophisticated software and hardware to actually enable journalists to do something different. And now I want to talk to you about drones, which is what I like. So to me, this belongs to the technical revolution. This is pretty much the next stage of it. When I talk about drones today, it's this type of drone, which is a small drone. It's not like the big, heavy one that I used for different usage, but this is a small one with a camera that's pretty much used for filming. It's used in many fields. It's used in agriculture. It's used in search and rescue. It's used for other things. But today we're going to talk about the journalism aspect. So in journalism, it can be used for a lot of things. So it can be used for documentary. So for example, on the top left, you have this drone that's above Paris and just maybe taking pictures and videos. It can be used for news coverage. So on the top right, you can see a protest and you have a drone flying above. So it's very hard to see the size of a crowd, for example. But with a drone, you can just fly above and check what's going on in real time. And then it's also used for sports. So here we have the skier, and it actually you can go at the speed of a skier. And if you think about it, you can't really cover this type of event unless you have tons of cameras everywhere, or otherwise you have blind spots, or you're missing some of it. But actually with the drones, you're much more flexible on where you can go and how you can film. And then the last one is concerts. And it's been used also more and more into concerts and personal events as well. So this is the current usage. But you might tell me, why should I use a drone? What's special about it? We have other tools. So why do we use drones? So first of all, we can do aerial shots. So this is a photo of the Stanford campus. It's called the Hoover Tower. It's a pretty important monument, I would say, at Stanford. But if you always see it like that, or you see it from further away on campus, but you never really see the top. You can climb the stairs, but even then you're inside. You don't really see it. So here is what it looks like from an aerial shot. So this is actually a video from some of my colleagues. This is not a reconstruction. This is actually the real video filming from the drone. And if you think about it, it's pretty awesome. It's like all of a sudden there is this view that I couldn't get. And all of a sudden I can just fly a small drone and get this view. So to me, this is really special because it would be something very hard to take. In the film industry, if you want to do an aerial shot, very often people would like fit a crane, for example. And this is very pricey. But also, so one of the main things is here we get a new way of looking at things. Until now, I couldn't see that unless I hired a plane maybe, but even that, this is costly as well. So here in this situation, a bit like what I said before, it can be very hard to describe how massive something is. And it works for hurricanes and floods, earthquakes, but it also works for just crowds that are very hard to look at. If we're talking about renting a helicopter or a plane, in the US it costs about $300 an hour. I don't know what the rate is in Israel. My guess is it's more expensive. It's probably, everything seems more expensive. So we're gonna guess it's more. But for this price, you actually get a drone. So you really have to think about it. It's like for the price of 1 hour filming, you can get a device that's gonna help you film on a daily basis. So there are some questions. So for example, is it legal for me to come and bring a drone? And it may not even be legal for you to fly in some countries or even try to film with a helicopter in this country. But actually with a drone, it's much easier to bring in than a helicopter. We'll go back later on the legislation. I don't want to get too much into that right now. But this is something you can just bring a drone and just look at it. So again, what's good about it is we have new viewing angles, and it's a low-cost device compared to having a helicopter or a plane. So now I want to show you an aerial shot. So this is of a hurricane after a hurricane, in Louisiana. For some reason, we're not having the sound. But as you can see here, you get shots you wouldn't get otherwise. Right now you're filming very close to the water. You're able to really see the cars, to really see what's happening, to see where the trees are, where the road was supposed to be. And then you can elevate the shot and see something different as well. So it really changes the process of the storytelling. Like, how do you tell a story when now you can like have new angles, new way of talking about it, new way of showing it? One thing I really like about drones is they're very available. So right now, if a flood happens somewhere, again, you may not have access to an helicopter right now and there. And if you have an earthquake like this, it may be very complex for a journalist to even go on the scene because maybe it's not physically accessible. So with a drone, you have this notion that is actually available to you. You can bring your drone, there may be one there, but it's very easy to bring with you. But now, what's the future? Because this is things we already do. So I just wanted to give you a preview in case you were not caught up with the digital world. But here is what I think the future will be. So there's different things about data gathering. So this notion of having an eye in the sky, there was, I think, this dream when satellites, started giving images that would be able to see everything. I remember growing up and we'd be told like, oh, someone can see what you're doing in your garden from a satellite. Well, actually, it's really hard to do, and it's really expensive, and we don't have access to satellites all the time, and we can't really do that unless they really want to. But with a drone, you actually can do that. So the way you're getting information is different. It's an extension of your reach. You can go to places you couldn't go before. You can access inaccessible areas. But as the batteries are lasting longer, we can also expect to have more complex footage. So before, the drones would fly for 20-minute stops, so you were very limited to what you could do. But now they go much longer, 40 minutes on like small drones and even longer on bigger drones. So you can do very complex things with it. The thing is also getting safer. So it's much easier now to bring them closer to a crowd. So when you're looking at this crowd over there, you could envision the drone flying very, very close to the crowd and even interviewing them for you. Because if you're physically not allowed into that country, you may be able to bring a drone that can replace you. And what would that interaction look like? And to me, those are key questions. It's like, it's not only the drone as a tool for filming, but it's also a drone as an extension of a journalist. And how does that support you? What does that look like? Because when a journalist comes, you may have a feel if they're friendly, how they, what they're going to do with the data you're giving them. But what happens when it's mediated through a robot? And those, we'll get back again to that a bit later in the talk. But those are key questions to understanding how, by having more and more robots and drones into our everyday life, how that affects the way we behave and how that affects the way we share information. So now another thing we can look at is conflict in war zones. So this is actually, I'm going to show you footage again. This is the Donetsk airport in Ukraine. This is from 2014, 2015. So the airport was totally destroyed. This is pretty horrifying when you think about it. But basically with a drone, you can fly through areas that, again, would probably not be safe for a journalist to go to. There is no way someone should go into this building without any checking. The building could just collapse. So by sending a drone, you actually reduce the human risk by checking what's going on. You can also think about adding sensors on the drone. You could have sensors looking at how many people are around. If it feels safe to go, what it looks like. You could look at the building structure. So there's a lot of options here. So it really is a mix of support and safety. It doesn't mean it's replacing people. I've read some articles where they're talking about hotel journalism with the concept that journalists would be stuck in a hotel and just direct a robot. I don't think this is what it is about. But at the same time, if there is a way to reduce the human risk of having accidents or problems by just sending a drone ahead first, this is a really good way to go forward. So another one I want to show you. So this is actually the same airport. So they use the footage you just saw to build a 3D model of the place. And again, this is pretty amazing. So we're talking before you would go, take some pictures, document, take some videos, but then you have to go back and build your story again from scratch. But now with a robot going and scanning through, you can actually get an accurate 3D model of the place, and you can really reconstruct what happened and really understand what it used to look like. So I'm just going to show you this model, if it works on the big screen. Nope. It's actually really hard to do. Okay, so this is actually the 3D model. It's really hard to navigate like that. Okay. So you get to see from much closer what it would look like. So again, as computer algorithms are getting better, we're getting much more accurate models. And the idea is once you document something, then you can use this model and use augmented reality to see what something looked like, to understand what happened. The investigation and the type of journalism you do with it goes much deeper. Let's try and go back to the talk. So this is actually very deep into the future, because right now, those models are really, really complex to get and to gather. But once we have ways of flying, for example, the drones, in the right way, you can really get the accurate data. When you come home, when you decide to do a piece on what happened, you actually can go inside the building and see exactly what happened and where. Because what happens often is people have an impression of what happened, they document on something, but maybe they didn't have the exact photo of that place, and somebody else had another part. But then putting it together is really hard. Once you start building a model like that, if you have several journalists going to a place, you can start gathering even this data on the cloud and start building much bigger model of what happened and maybe even fit the story on it. And now you could have a point where you interviewed someone at this place in particular and they tell you a story about it. And you can build full augmented reality model from that. When we talk about augmented reality, this can go much deeper. So here, this is a photo of Aleppo. And so for journalists to arrive on a scene like you see at the bottom, it's really hard to know where they are, to even figure it out. But by being able to use augmented reality, they can get a sense of what it used to look like before. So now you're in a situation where actually we're giving tools for people to even do their job on the ground. And then to go and tell the story in a different way, because now they can use both images to actually tell that story. One way we're thinking about augmented reality with drone is also with the drone projecting information on a surface. So you could imagine a journalist going with a drone and the drone helping the journalist understand what a building used to look like, just by projecting over it. I mean, this is with a drone, but the same thing would go with head-mounted displays or even like some sort of virtual reality on the phone. But the idea is really using this new technology that you have at your disposal to actually help you gather the data and then help you collect it, keep it, and then retrieve a story later. So now the next thing I want to talk about is social media platforms. So this is a map of what's considered to be the freedom on the net, so people able to talk freely about what they want, and it's very highly correlated with freedom of journalism. And so what happens at the moment, it's very popular by governments, is when they disagree with their population on something, they just block social networks. It works very well in a lot of countries. It's pretty terrifying when you think about it. So the new technique is just to block the internet and prevent people to have access and talk to each other and communicate what is actually going on somewhere. But if you think about the drone could be a physical platform to gather the data. So you could actually have drones flying to a location, and you could connect to that drone with your personal device and just sending information. So you could actually still have access, so possibly have access to internet, but definitely have access to a way of getting the information out of the country, so then it can be retrieved internationally, and hopefully then you can get help from outside, getting a better sense of what is actually going on. One of the main issues when you have something like a social network lockdown, or when you have internet lockdown, is that people are not able to show what is going on. And the government feels much freer to do whatever they want with their population. Once you start having platforms like this, it makes a very, very big difference because the data can come out. So just thinking about it as a way to hop the information from one place to another, or to give people platforms to express themselves, I think is very, very important. So you could be a person, you're part of a crowd, you have your phone, you document something, a drone flies by, you could basically send it to the drone captures that data, and then takes it out. So it's really mixing both the virtual and the physical world together by having a platform that allows you to do it. Another thing I'd like to talk about is long-term investigation. So for example, some things are very hard to document, like climate change. So when we want to observe it, right now what happens is people go to some places, they take some pictures or videos, and then they come back several years later and they do the same, and over time we get an impression of what's been going on. But if you think about the drone, you could just pre-plan a path and say, okay, now we're gonna fly it this way and we're gonna check this area. And then over time, we're going to see what the difference is. And in terms of visualization, so it's the same concept as with the time-lapse videos. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with time-lapses, but I'm just going to show you a very quick one. And here again, so this is a time-lapse video, which means they've been taking a lot of different pictures at the same location or close location. And from those pictures, they're able to create a video of everything that happened during the time the pictures were taken. So you could imagine having something very, very similar to document what's been happening over time in a location. And we could think about it to look at deforestation, we could think about it for climate change, we could think about it for animal population and animal control in different places. I mean, this is just a really nice one from the National Geographic, but it shows you, again, those are very simple in many ways, computer tools, but they're very powerful once you put images on them. And with that, you can really think about adopting some of the scientific approach to journalism, where you document in very specific way all the time at specific times, and the technology supports you doing that. Okay, so now those are lots of ideas about how we could do it and what that would mean, but what are the challenges? There are quite a few challenges. So one of them is actually security concerns. So drones can be unsafe. So you may have seen videos of people hurting themselves with drones. Have you ever seen that? No one? I see people laughing. You must have seen some of them. It's pretty crazy. You see, like, there was this singer, I'm not going to give his name, who basically was in a concert. It was being filmed. He tried to grab the drone because he thought that was exciting, and he got hurt really, really bad. And then he's, like, bleeding all over his concert. It's crazy. One thing we've noticed in the experiments I've been doing is that people don't understand how unsafe drones are. They think they're really cool, they want to, they impersonate them, they think about them as pets, they think about that as a living creature. They don't think about them as a technology that may hurt them because it's got 4 to 6 to 8 propellers. So really understanding how do we work with drones without hurting yourself or without hurting anyone else or damaging anything else is really important. Some countries have started asking people to take a pilot license. In the US right now, it costs about $9,000, so it's not cheap. So all of a sudden, it's not something that's available to everyone. It's only available to people that are willing to take the test and the exams and really go for it, something much harder. So if you think about it in this way, and this is only one way of legislating about it, then it means that within like a newspaper, for example, you'd have 1 or 2 people that are the ones filming with drones. I don't believe this is going to be true in the future. I think as drones become more autonomous, we'll find ways that they're much more safe, but it's still something to consider in how we make them and how we include them into our work lives. The other question is about regulation. So every country right now is regulating, and everybody's struggling because they don't understand the usage, they don't understand what it means, they don't understand how to regulate. So it changes all the time. So right now we've seen in the last 2-3 years, we've just seen changes about anything. So flight heights, there's a very strong philosophical question as well behind it. It's like people are really worried about what people are doing with drones. You know, is my usage of the drone safe? Is it unsafe? If I'm, like there's been this protest in the US a few weeks ago where basically the government was being violent with the protesters, and they tried to use water cannons to like get rid of the drones because they didn't want to be filmed on what they were doing. So if it's not legal to bring a drone because the government doesn't want the documentation to happen, do we still bring them in or not? So, you know, it's also like this link between like what is your philosophical belief and what is the current regulation at a certain stage somewhere. And also, what are the consequences? What does it mean to fly a drone in a forbidden zone? We're not very aware of what that means. I'm pretty sure if you fly a drone in North Korea and you're not in North Korea, you're fine. But if you're within the country, you're probably in huge trouble. But if you try that in the US or here, you're maybe not in that much trouble. And again, because the regulations are changing so much and nobody's really understanding how that fits with the current regulation, this is really complicated, and this is a challenge we need to address when we think about using them for journalism. The next one is an obvious one, but it's not that obvious. So it's about privacy. So here we have this person in his garden with his kids, and all of a sudden there's a drone. How do we deal with that? Because maybe the drone is just flying by to deliver something to the neighbor, but maybe the drone is taking pictures of him like this, and maybe he doesn't want those pictures to be taken. So there's huge privacy concerns, and also trespassing. What does it mean to trespass with a drone? I mean, if you think about it, you may not go into someone's house just like that, but your cat might. So what about your drone? Is it a problem or is it not a problem? So there's a lot of research questions also for us behind it about acceptability at individual level, at government level. What does it mean to have a drone in the environment? What does it mean to use drones? How do we use drones for journalism in a way that makes sense? And also, could we find ways for the drone to inform people of what it's doing? So right now, if I'm taking a picture of you, I'm going to take my phone that I don't have, and I'm going to go like this. From my behavior, you know that I'm taking a picture, right? Okay. But then, you know, if you have a drone, you may not know what's going on. And so the fear of privacy and trespassing is also due to the fact that right now it's a bit of a black box. So by designing drones differently, we may actually get into a situation where it's okay to have drones because people know what's going on with it. And maybe when the drone is filming, they're aware that the drone is filming, and they can say, no, I don't want to be filmed. Another thing about security is things like weather. You know, if the weather is not good enough, you shouldn't fly. And in aerospace, this is very well understood. If somebody is in charge of the flight area and they say the plane doesn't take off, it's very clear. With drones, it's not. And we don't have that highly trained people. So we have to be very conscious and very careful about what that means. There's also a lot of questions about insurance. Right now, there's not many policies. Same thing as regulation. It's changing, but there's not much of an understanding. What does it mean, you know, if I fly my drones through IDC and I break a window? Which of my head of departments do I go to? Okay, no, I showed you. So these are big questions that are happening. And if you're thinking about going to film abroad and you hurt someone, you know, again, you're a foreigner in another country, what does it mean? Okay, I'm running out of time, but I'm gonna try to tell you a little bit more. So what I'm really interested in is the control modality. So here we're seeing a typical setup of someone filming with a drone. So they have the remote control for controlling the movement of the drone, but they also have some camera and some screens to tell them what's going on. And this is actually really hard. Did any of you ever try that? One person? Or the rest is being shy? Was it hard? Yeah. It's really hard because you're supposed to keep the drone in your line of sight. This is part of some of the regulations, not here. In some countries, you're supposed to keep the drone in your line of sight. You're trying to see what the drone is seeing. You're trying to see what the drone is doing. And you're trying to control at the same time. It's very hard. So how can we support people by building better interaction techniques? So this is my area and what I'm interested in. And in order to understand that, what we proposed at Stanford was to work on a drone as a tour guide. So it was both a storytelling tool, but also a challenge in terms of how do we create interaction with a storyteller. And the idea was to create something very natural. So somebody who's never seen a drone, never interacted with one, could just directly interact with one. So the storytelling aspect, it's pretty amazing to think that a robot could just fly around you and tell you a story. So when you're making up the news or something, you can just annotate a place, and the person could just navigate through it and get information about it. And so here's an example of a map here. So we've basically used that system that was projected on the ground, and the person could, with two very simple gestures that I will show you in a minute, just select what tour they wanted to take on campus and get information about the campus. And I'm going to pass you the technical details, but we just embedded some vision, it's called ProCam system, projector and camera system on the drone, just to create an interface. So everything you're going to see here is actually running. So it's not perfect, but this is one of the only systems in the world right now that allows you to have a direct input and output from a drone. So here we're seeing what the interface looks like. And so here we're seeing this person was just selecting this interface around them. And the drone is flying above them, and this is actually in real time. And they're basically able, through just this menu and two simple gestures, to just interact with the drone. And so, yeah, it's very hard to see with the lights. I don't know if we can do anything about it. Probably not. So here you can see the map where basically the person is choosing what they want to visualize on the map, so they're getting information. And you can see there's a bit of jitter from the flight of the drone, but it's actually working pretty well. And here we have these two people who are going to follow the drone. Yeah, it's really hard to see, but the drone projects some arrows on the floor, and the arrows give information about the building next to them. And so they can just follow the drone and just get information in real time to what's happening around them. And then with a simple hand gesture, they're going to be able to query for that menu. So here the menu has 4 options, but it could have many more options. And they can just resume the tour. So the idea is somebody who's never used a drone before can just go there, wave to a drone, the drone flies above them, create an interface around their body, and with just a simple gesture from the hand, they can just select and get information. So this one is only at night. So as I said, right now this is the only system in the world that's fully embedded on the drone where you can do input and output. So like right now we're working on the next step of what do you do in the daylight. So in the daylight we're looking at voice commands, but there's a lot of challenges, technical challenges in how do you recognize voice when there's a lot of noise, how do you talk from a drone, how do you visualize information from a drone. So we're working on it, but it's not an easy task. And so this is what it looks like with a group, which is probably impossible to see with this lighting, so we're going to skip. Okay, so in conclusion, I showed you some of the potential of drones for journalism, helping you with new viewing angles. It's a low-cost technology that's very easily available and that allows for new applications for journalism. There are lots of challenges, so some technical ones that we just discussed. There's a lot of safety and regulation questions. There's also privacy issues, but it is a powerful tool for journalists, and it could be a future companion. Thank you very much. I think we have a bit of time for questions. Is that right? Yes? Okay, so augmented reality right now is very difficult to do in real time. So we're talking a little bit further down in the future. There's two steps. The drone itself can help by going in real time, checking what's been going on. So right now you have to either dispatch a helicopter, which again may be costly, may be available, may not be available, may be possible depending on where you are, and the drone can just bring you there right away. So I think in that regard, this is already possible. Now, if you want to start doing augmented reality, right now, it's heavy computer science. But in the future, that will run real time and we'll be able to so now we can actually do it, but not from the drone. So now we can have, for example, news on TV showing you something and having augmented reality over showing you another layer of information. So this is already possible. The other thing we can do with augmented reality is as we're thinking about having augmented reality devices into the home. So for example, if you look at Google Cardboard, you could go right away with a drone, film in 360, for example, or film over some data already gathered in that area. And then the person at home would get the double layer of information. So those things are like in the process of, being there with us, but it's a bit more work still. Yes?
Yeah.
Sorry.
You said it's about regulation, but I see the problem is the enforcement. Because anyone, like here, you can go now in Israel on the beach, but anyone have a drone, I'm sure there are regulations. There's absolutely no enforcement. I don't know if they can enforce it. You just go in your building, suddenly you see a drone flying, They don't even know who you're going to call. How are they going to find the guy who operated?
So I don't think it's a problem. I think it's a challenge. There's two sides of it. I mean, one side is regulation and one side is enforcement. I spent some time in China. I'm pretty sure if you fly a drone on Tiananmen and it's not allowed, they're going to come and find you. And I'm pretty sure they will find you because they have vans that are monitoring everything that's going on on the internet around them. They will find you, and you probably don't want them to find you. So I think it's the same thing as that map I was showing you about the freedom of journalism. I think in some countries, we have much more freedom, and I think luckily here we do. And so maybe enforcing people filming is not a big deal. And in some other countries, there's less freedom, and this is a big deal. So I think it's a mix of that as well in terms of enforcing. There was a person that got caught in Paris a few years ago, I think 3 years ago now, filming over Paris, and Paris is a no-flight zone, and they got thrown in jail. I think it was a foreign journalist, and nobody was expecting it. And all of a sudden, when they start enforcing things that we don't even know, what does it mean? And because we don't know yet what it means, what the regulations are, and how the enforcement happens, we just have to be very careful about it and aware about it. And one way could be to have a good blog where we're explaining the rules everywhere. And right now we don't have that. And the regulations are changing so quickly. At the same time, that's what I said, it's very hard for countries to create regulations because they do not understand what to do. So in the US, they've offered the possibility for people to block their house or their farms. So I can say, I don't want my house to be flown over, so I can go, I think, on a website, I can block that like GPS location. So if you try to fly your drone will like go around it, which makes no sense. But this is how they looked at it. But right now, there's a lot of concerns, and so governments are trying to help, but they don't really know how to help. So some of our work as well is to help them understand how to regulate based on the usage. Yes?
Well, first of all, thank you for this fascinating lecture, and congratulations on your first
Thank you.
lecture as a faculty. I would like to stress the role of journalists, of professionalism in journalism, and to say what you said actually, that the drones are only companions to professional journalists. They are not replacing journalists. And maybe on the contrary, now we need more professional, more trained journalists to deal with the new data of journalism. In other places around the world, our journalists are being trained to work with drones, because in Israel I don't
Well, I think it's up to us to open a program for that. There's very little programs right now. So this year, I think there's going to be 1 or 2 programs in the world that are going to train people to do drone journalism. But it's a very new field. Everything is new. So the way of doing it, the way of filming, there's also a lot of questions. So are we, for example, we're looking at enforcing some of the cinematography rules inside the way the drone flies. So if the drone can automatically decide how to film, do you need to learn how to do filming from a drone? So there's also like questions like that, and as the technology evolves, that's changing. But I do strongly believe, I mean, we had this conversation with Noam, I do strongly believe that we need to have classes to teach people how to do aerial filming, and to think, and to also to think about what it means to use a drone when you're doing your filming. And it's different from just using a microphone or a camera. So I think it's important for people to be confronted to those questions and what's professionalism in this type of journalism.
And it's not replacing journalism.
No, it's not. I don't believe technology will replace in any way. I think it's a support, and it's really understanding how to better support people. You know, what do journalists need from the technology for it to actually do what is best? Thank you. Thank you very much.